In this video, we will show you how to replace your rear brake caliper on this Ford Fusion. This is part of your rear brakes, located behind your rear wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Since your vehicle has electronic parking brake, we need to make sure we have it in service mode. To do that, we want to take the key and put it in the on position. The vehicle is not running. Continuing from here, let's press all the way down on the accelerator pedal and our parking brake switch here, we're pressing that down as well. Once you've done that, while holding these in position, go ahead and turn off the ignition and then turn it back on, once again, while still holding. We could hear it go into service mode, and it gave us an audible sound inside the passenger compartment. You can continue on by turning off your key power and safely raising and supporting the rear of the vehicle. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing you need to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so your wheel's off the ground. Once you've done that, continue on to removing all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and we can get the wheel off of here. To start replacing this, typically I like to make my way right up inside this area to find the bleeder screw. Unfortunately on ours, the bleeder screw is broken. So with that said, I'm going to make my way down here to the banjo bolt. This is what holds the brake flex hose to the caliper itself, and it houses fluid in this area. We'll have our collection receptacle under here and continue on with the 12mm. I can see fluid coming out of there. Continuing from here, we're going to make our way up inside the passenger compartment. The best thing to do here would be to take a pry bar and gently push it up against that brake pedal, pushing it all the way down to the floor. We need to hold it there, so you can take that pry bar and put it right up against the front end of the seat and press it up against. After that, we'll make our way back out here. After completing that, we're going to close off that banjo bolt. We only need to snug it, and then we'll continue on removing the brake pads. We're going to have to disassemble the caliper. Now that we've snugged our banjo bolts, let's make our way to the outboard side of the caliper here. We're going to remove our mounting clip. For this, I'm just going to use some cutters. You don't need to cut it, but these grip on pretty well, and you should be able to pull this right out of place. Once you've removed that, we'll continue on along the back side of the caliper for 2 slider pins. To start disassembling the caliper from here, we're going to pay attention to each one of our slider pins. The pins themselves are going to be located right here and right up in here. The process for one is the exact same thing as the other. Essentially for each of these, there's going to be a small plastic cover that you'd want to remove. Now, if you were looking straight in from the inboard side towards the outboard side, you're going to find the slider pin and you'll be using a 7mm Allen head socket to remove this. Let's get this one off of here as well. Go ahead and remove that slider pin. You can give it a quick inspection. We are replacing this with a brand new caliper. We'll just set this aside. We will not be reusing it. Slider pins are out of there. Go ahead and take hold of that caliper and we'll remove this. A quick inspection of our brake pads. If it looks like they're worn at an angle or worn low for some reason, go ahead and replace them. This one's clearly in good shape. Now we're going to carefully hang the caliper along the front area here, putting minimal pressure on our wiring or our brake flex hose. We don't want to cause any damage. Continuing from there, we're going to remove the parking brake motor from the back side of the caliper. This is held in place with 2 5mm headed mounting bolts. Remove the pair and carefully remove the motor from the back side of the caliper. We'll inspect those, dispose of them properly. You will not be reusing them. Continuing from here, I'm going to hold the caliper and the motor itself and start rocking it, essentially breaking it free, and we'll pull it out and straight away from the caliper. Once you have the motor off of there, we'll just have a quick peek in this area to ensure there is no damage. This looks fine. We'll temporarily set this aside for now. Let's pause on the caliper itself and we'll start removing the bracket from this area. This is held in place with two 15mm mounting bolts. Remove the pair. Just going to start that back in a couple threads. Remove your bracket, dispose of it properly. Now we'll start removing the banjo bolts from the flex hose and from the caliper. A quick note about this is if you did not press that brake pedal all the way to the floor and hold it there while completing this process, fluid will continuously drip out of this until your master cylinder is eventually empty, in which case you're going to have a serious issue. We'll use our 12mm to remove the banjo bolts. Keep in mind there could still be fluid located in the caliper, so we have our collection receptacle under this area. There's our banjo bolt. If your brake flex hose is stuck in place, it's typically due to this hook that comes right along this area directly into the caliper. I'm just going to use an angled pick to gently pull this out of place. And there's our caliper. We'll make sure we empty this out into the collection receptacle and dispose of it properly. Continuing on from there, we need to pay attention to both sides of the flex hose. You can see this shiny area here. You need to make sure you remove that from both sides of the flex hose and clean the flex hose. There's one. We'll just check the other side of the flex hose here to confirm it's not on there. That looks good. A quick wipe. And a close inspection. Let's have a quick look at the brand new caliper over on the bench. There's a couple things that we'll have to pay attention to before we can install it. First of all, we have our two mounting bolts that hold the electric motor to the backside there. We can remove those. Of course, we will be using these. Continuing from there, we'll be using some high temperature lubricant. Continuing from there, we're going to use some silicone paste along the shaft area here and along this O-ring that you can see right along this outer edge. Spread that around with a gloved finger. Now it's time for the banjo bolt with the two brand new gaskets. We will be using these gaskets. Got both of those right there. Now we need to gain access to our two slider pins. You know what to do. We'll pop these covers out of the way. Use our 7mm Allen head to remove each one of the two slider pins. Let's set the bracket aside. Continuing from here, we're going to gain focus on this portion of the caliper only. We'll be using our caliper lubricant inside of each of these two ports, essentially making its way all the way down to where this metal area is. The slider boot actually does continue on all the way through the outer side there. We want to make sure it's lubricated in the center. Now we'll be paying attention to each of our two caliper ears. In the inboard side of our caliper piston. Applying lubricant in these areas will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Go ahead and set this aside. And now we can take our caliper bracket over to the vehicle. Let's take that brand new bracket, we'll get it in place, carefully bringing it over our brake rotor. Start in each of your two 15mm bolts. For these, I typically like to use some blue thread locker on that tip of the threading there. Start in both of your mounting bolts, snug them up, torque those to 66 foot-pounds. We'll have a quick look at our parking brake motor, just wipe it down, ensure that you don't see any miscellaneous debris. Let's bring in the brand new caliper. We've already lubricated our O-ring seal. Let's go ahead and give this a light twist as we press this together. Align your two mounting bolt holes. With both of those aligned, we'll continue on with our 5mm Allen head bolts. May have to twist this a little bit to get everything aligned. Start in each of the two bolts loosely by hand, and then you can go ahead and snug them up. We'll temporarily hang this aside. It's time for our two brake pads. We have the inboard pad, which has that metal clip up along the top. The outboard pad does not have that clip. When you press these in, you want to ensure that they don't have to be forced in or tapped in with a hammer. If that's the case, there's something restricting it, and you may have to clean up the edge of the pads a little bit. It's time for our two caliper slider pins. We want to make sure we lubricate the entire smooth shafted area here. Of course, we did already lubricate the pin boots. It's just a good idea to have a little bit more on here. We'll slide those down into the slider pin boots here. You don't need to press them all the way through, just have them resting in there so they will not fall out. Let's take hold of that caliper. We're going to swing that up and into place here. Start in each of your two caliper slider pins by hand. We'll snug those up and torque them to 21 foot-pounds. Install your protective covers, those just slide right in. Along the outside of the caliper, we're going to insert our metal clip here. This will be under spring pressure. We're going to have to press this in, flex this down underneath the bracket. Tap it in, make sure it's secured. It's time to secure the flex hose. To do that, we'll be using our brand new banjo bolt and 2 brand new gaskets. We'll take one of those gaskets and slide it right on that banjo bolt. Slide it down and through the flex hose. Continuing from there, we have our second new gasket. We'll put that down along the bottom area here. That sandwiches in the flex hose, and now we can take this and get it in position in the caliper. Once you have the hooked area and the threaded port properly aligned, start in the mounting bolts by hand. After you have it bottomed out, torque that to 18 foot-pounds. Double check to make sure your flex hose is completely secured to the caliper. Remove pressure from your brake pedal. Now in the passenger compartment, let's put the key in the on position without the vehicle running. Continue on to pressing the gas pedal all the way to the floor, and we're going to lift up on our parking brake release. While doing that, let's turn the key power off and then back on within 5 seconds. Okay, looks like that's complete. Starting at the master cylinder, we want to make sure we clean up the area so no miscellaneous debris falls inside the braking system. Just give this a quick wipe. You can remove the cap, turn that counterclockwise. Once you have that off of there, a quick inspection of the seal. If it looks like it's cracked or damaged in any way, you definitely want to go ahead and replace that cover. Now continuing from here, typically you'd want to try to remove as much of the brake fluid from the master cylinder as possible. On this master cylinder, you can see that the neck actually makes its way all the way underneath the wiper cowl, and it's almost impossible to remove the brake fluid, so essentially what we're going to do now is just make sure we're topped off up to the maximum line with our clean .4 brake fluid. With that topped off, we'll reinstall our cap, and now we can make our way to the right rear. Now starting at the right rear, we're going to pay attention along the back side of the caliper. This is where the bleeder screw is located. On my caliper, I'll be using a 10mm. Now before I open this up, I'm going to talk through the bleeding sequence. To be able to do this, we want to have a second person inside of the passenger compartment. That person's going to pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm, let me know they're holding it, and I'm going to use my 10mm to open this up. When this happens, you're going to see fluid making its way out. While we're doing this, we're going to confirm that there's no dirty fluid and definitely no air bubbles in the system. We'll repeat the process as necessary. Go ahead and pump up the brake pedal, please.
Holding.
My wrench on there. I'll close this now. Go ahead and pump, please. Go ahead and pump.
Holding.
That's perfect. You can release, thank you. Now the amount of times you have to do this can vary depending on your vehicle itself. Like I said, you just want to make sure you have all the dirty fluid out of there and it's only clean fluid making its way out. Once you've completed this process, go ahead and clean up your mess, reinstall your bleeder screw cover in this area, and continue on repeating this exact same process on the driver's side rear. After you've done that, make your way back up under the hood to the master cylinder. Back at the master cylinder, we can remove our cap. We've already inspected that seal. Let's top it off to the maximum again. Reinstall your cover. Now we can make our way to the passenger side front. Now making our way from the master cylinder, we're over at the passenger side front. Let's go ahead and repeat this process. Pump the brake pedal, please.
Holding.
Go ahead and pump.
Holding.
Go ahead and pump, please.
Holding.
Perfect. You can release, thank you. Now, as I said, you need to repeat this process until you see only clean fluid and definitely no air bubbles. After you've cleaned your mess here, repeat the process on the driver's side front and then make your way back to that master cylinder. We finished the driver's side front. We're back at the master cylinder. We're gonna remove that cap and top off the brake fluid right up to the maximum line with our clean .4 brake fluid. Reinstall our cap. If you made a mess, you definitely want to make sure you clean it up. Now it's time to install the wheel. We'll get this in place. Start on all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts. Once they're bottomed out, we can get the wheel safely on the ground. Torque each of these to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely back down on the ground, we're going to torque each one of our lug nuts in a crisscross manner to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.